We were quite worried about there being basically not enough data and quantitative evidence used in making assurance judgments. There was quite a reliance on having, no doubt, good and challenging conversations with key people that are involved in the project delivery, but there not being adequate data to back that up, adequate data about outcomes. And it's linked to issues around that we found before in the work that we've done on contract management about the quality of the performance regime around contracts. In our survey, it was almost a third of suppliers felt that the KPI regime that was in place didn't give the public sector buyer an adequate means of judging contract performance. And lastly, the control in place to act on the findings. This is really about the consequences, really, of the reviews and making sure that they have bite and that there is incentive, compulsion to act on significant and serious findings from assurance reviews. Not to dwell on this, but just to probe a little bit more into this idea of the different types of assurance and the point about the over-reliance on point in time. Certainly there is a significant place for point-in-time assurance in any assurance regime. There will be particular and obvious points in the gestation of a project or an outsourcing arrangement where you will want to have, the commissioners will want assurance provided independently, particularly at the key investment point, around the key investment points of the project. But at the same time, in some cases, I think there is a case for continuous assurance that might be based around, the assurance experts using the KPIs, some sort of KPI regime, assurance people being a little bit more embedded into the project, a little bit more permanently attached, as it were, to the project, rather than, I guess, just being the guys that come in on a very one-off basis for 3 or 5 days to do a particular piece of point-in-time assurance. Actually, I'm going to skip that. That doesn't help. So what we tried to do, we wanted to kind of set out in our report, based on that analysis of the assurance landscape and what's happening around assurance of projects, we wanted to set out what we thought were the principles of an effective overall assurance system. Now, these do apply to projects, but they also apply to ongoing program spend, to ongoing contractual arrangements. There's a sense in which assurance, it's easier for assurance to focus on projects, and you could say this if you wanted about our report. It would be a fair challenge because projects are definable, they have an end point, but actually all of the things that you want to do to provide assurance to the people providing the money, running the risks, who need the benefits to be delivered from the program, the project. They need that equally, whether it's a project or whether it's not a project. And around outsourcing, I think our view is it would be helpful to build these kind of principles into any outsourcing contract, into any outsourcing arrangement. The more, if you're working with an outsourcing supplier, they will have their own internal assurance arrangements and requirements for the work they're doing. As far as possible, those should be brought together and integrated to make one coherent overall assurance regime around the contract. Clearly there'll be little bits and pieces around the edge of that you won't share openly necessarily with the supplier, but the vast bulk of assurance activity, it should be possible to integrate between the supplier and the public sector buyer. And these are the kind of principles that we think should be embedded in that. They're probably obvious from the kind of the diagnosis that I've presented already of where the problems are, so they probably don't need too much dwelling on. But certainly with an unambiguous mandate, it being very clear when projects, programs, contracts need to be subject to particular types of assurance. It shouldn't be easy to just opt out. It should be very clear what is required. Just changing the emphasis a bit, of course, assurance should be interested in performance against interim milestones, but not at the expense of outcomes. I think a lot more should be done in the assurance regime around getting data on tracking benefits, tracking delivery against the ultimate outcomes that we're looking for here. And data is the key word there. The more exacting evidence base, that's exactly what I mean. So it's not just the qualitative, let's seek some stakeholder views. There should be some real hard data behind the assurance judgments. It should be very clear what kind of actions are triggered by particular kinds of assurance results in the regime. Better thought about planning, better, I guess, incentives in place and recognition of the contributions that public servants from one body make to assurance in other parts of the public sector. So, what are the incentives? How can we put the incentives in place to get, somebody to contribute to, say, a gateway review of another department? How can we make sure that the full learning opportunity that provides is understood, as well as obviously the cost implications of having to use consultants for that kind of activity. There should be one integrated system where anybody can clearly describe the relationships between the different parts. They fit together. The results from one assurance mechanism feed in naturally to other assurance mechanisms, rather than there being any sense that these are disconnected. And then, if we accept that assurance is this really rich learning opportunity for individuals, sure, as reviewers, but on a cross-public sector basis as well, there needs to be real investment in capturing those lessons and disseminating those lessons from assurance in an engaging way. And last and definitely not least, it's got to be mindful of the burden placed on projects. It's got to be proportionate. Assurance has got to be designed based very clearly on the cost, the risk of non-delivery. People need to be able to justify clearly that the assurance burden delivers a return in terms of managing risk and cost. Right, I'm absolutely not going to attempt to talk you through that, and I apologise not only for knocking off Colin's sheets, but also for inflicting this very, very detailed slide on you. I think it's best really to just largely leave it with you. I think most of the points in there are probably familiar ones they're ones that I've kind of explained already. I guess one thing I would emphasise in the, basically this is a model of, the obvious plan, do, report, control kind of management cycle, probably familiar enough kind of cycle. I think just to emphasise in the report, we do think it's important that there is clear reporting to all stakeholders, that's tailored to the stakeholders, not done on a one-size-fits-all basis. So, the outcome of the reporting of assurance shouldn't just be the issuing of one big fat report, which every kind of stakeholder has to use and engage with. I think there is a better way of doing it than that, a more tailored way of doing it. I do think there should be some public reporting of that as well. And lastly, I thought it was worth just saying, the landscape here is moving incredibly quickly around what central government is doing, particularly around major projects. There's a review of, I think it's about 33 odd major projects going on right now, due to report by the end of July. There's been clear commitments to vastly improving the system of assurance. We're certainly pleased that the kind of recommendations we were making about the need for a more mandatory, more integrated system of assurance seem to have been taken up, and there's a clear time commitment around those. We're also pleased that there are commitments about the public reporting. That's certainly important to us. It's been important to the Public Accounts Committee, who are the parliamentary committee that we report to. That's been an important issue for them. So those commitments we're certainly pleased with. I think that's all I had to say. I finished a minute and a half early, and that's because every other time I have spoken at one of Colin's conferences, I have overrun massively and made him very, very angry, and I was obviously so scared of doing that again. I've cut my material back and maybe just a little bit too far. I mean, this is on our website. The other things I've been talking about, like the contract management work, the collaborative procurement work that Colin kindly mentioned, that's all available on our website. If it raises any issues or questions, please drop me an email. Be interested in your reactions to this stuff. Thank you.